Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Taiton Resources webinar. Let me introduce myself. My name is David Lau, Executive Director of Taiton Resources. I have my Managing Director, Noel Ong, who is also a geologist on the panel, and David Maskiming, our Exploration Manager. Just a bit of update on the IPO. The closing date for IPO has now been extended to 5 p.m. Perth time, Friday, 11 November. And as a friendly reminder to all existing shareholders of Taiton, and formerly known as Syngas Limited, there is a priority offer to all existing shareholders, whereby you'll be entitled to options based on your existing shareholding if you apply for the IPO. And you also be eligible to apply for excess options from any shortfall options not allocated in the first round. Now, let us start this by me handling the presentation to Noel Ong, our Managing Director. Noel?
All right, welcome to everyone. I'll just need to share my screen. Can everyone see that screen? Yep. Just a brief introduction. Obviously, Taiton is undergoing an IPO. We're raising a minimum of 7 million, which is fully underwritten to a maximum of 10 million. I'll go through the presentation and then I'll invite Dave Maskiming to give us a bit more detail on the technical part of things. And then we'll run that off with questions and we'll hopefully answer those questions. So we're basically looking for a big project where we call it the elephant in Australia, because at the moment, most of the discoveries are made undercover, and most of the low-hanging fruit has been taken up in the last probably 2 decades. And that's a disclaimer which will be in the presentation that we will have up on our website. So really, the key components, we're basically looking for something that's in a new mineral province, future proofing. At the moment, the sort of the flavor of the month is the lithium and the rare earths, but the thematics for going forward really sits with these base metals, the growth metals, the coppers, the nickels, uranium is part of that, and gold. So our focus is actually to find these minerals, and the new concepts, we're looking for big projects that have been in provinces that have been sort of misunderstood and neglected. The flagship of our project is what we call the Highway Project, which is in South Australia. Excuse me. And where we are is basically on the Stuart Highway, which sits around the township of Glendumbo in Kingonia. And basically, we're on the margin of what we would call the Gawler Craton, as well as the IOCG belt that sits onto the eastern part of our margin. As you can see, the IOCG belt really is mega projects: Olympic Dam, Prominent Hill, Carrapateena. These are big projects, right? And one of the aspects of IOCGs is that they are very deep. Olympic Dam is 400 to 500, Carrapateena is about 500 meters. So, and the other project that we have is called the Challenger West project, which sits to the west of the Challenger gold mine. The concept here being that Challenger gold mine historically produced 1.2 million ounces of gold, high grade, but there's really nothing been discovered ever since, since the 90s when it was discovered. So apart from the little prospects that Taurana had worked on from the days of Dominion, where they have some small supergene, I think they have a total resource of close to 300,000 ounces, isolated satellite projects, right? So, and they're all very oxide based. So that's where we're focusing on. The Highway project really is a new province. When these projects were shown to me, the concept was that look, we've got a potential here in the new province, previously neglected, previously not known to be endowed, and not of the same age. Sort of sits in between, somewhere between what people believe the Gwalar is and what people believe what the IOCG was, or is, I should say. So the key aspect is that technically, in terms of the tectonic, the mineralization, which I'll show you later, all indicates that this is some sort of a mineralized zone, but the age group is where it's fairly unknown. So we undertook zircon testing on rocks that have been in this area. And as you can see, BB2, which is the one that kicks up, is 1597 million years, which is basically tapping, well, showing that it's the same age group as what's out in Olympic Dam. What this indicates to us is that, that likelihood that we're actually sourcing rocks in that same domain has just gone through the roof. We're not saying that there is definite there, but definitely we're tapping the same source. The other two are slightly higher, but as we'll talk later, the zircon is highly fractionated, which really comes about from hydrothermal activity, which again is kind of evidence pointing that this is a melting pot of potential mineralization. Porphyries, one of the key aspects of highway is that we believe that it's a sweet spot for porphyries. And what are porphyries? Porphyries is basically the kind of system that produces the most amount of metals around the world. As you can see, they happen along these margins, these subduction zones where two plates collide. And that's where we want to sort of present that highway is, well, we're sitting on some sort of a margin between two tectonic blocks. These are our tenements that sits there. As you can see, the geology has very well been sort of, I wouldn't say it's wrongly allocated, but I think the understanding of this has been misunderstood. And people believe that this is actually, a different age group, different geology suit. But I think the fact that we've done the zircon and what Dave has come up in terms of interpretation of what the geology is there may be a lot of similarities somewhere between IOCG belt and what's happening in the Gwalar, and there would be an interface there. Hence, sort of my interpretation that, potentially we are basically sitting on a margin of two blocks where most of this mineralization would exist through sort of extensional structural events. The highway project is centered around what we call the MERINO prospect. As you can see, this grid here is about 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers. So within that space, you can see a lot of mineralization. So when you look at those numbers there may not be sort of ore grade or mine-making kind of numbers, but it tells you that there's mineralization there. It tells you that there's a suite of pathfinders that people use to look for porphyries. With moly, 630 ppm moly, that's extremely sort of almost ore grade kind of stuff, resource grade that you see quoted around the world. And we have lead and zinc. So there is definitely some sort of mineralization, some sort of cooking system. There's no doubt that there is mineralization there. And porphyry is prevalent in a sense because, we got moly as the biggest pathfinder to a porphyry system. One on top of this is that the depth of basement is up to 20 meters in some spots. I think in some places it's up to a maximum 120 meters. But as you can see further on in another plan, we can tell you that the majority or 2/3 of our tenement sits in an area where cover is known to be up to only 50 meters deep. Some of those drilling there you can see are hitting basement sub 20 meters. So that alone is very, very favorable for us to go and look for these kind of projects. And we know that from our own interpretation that we potentially are looking at a porphyry system here in Angus, what we call Angus, and the Brahman prospect most likely is looking like to be excuse me, as skarn. This is a closer look into that MERINO prospect area. As you can see, there's a lot of indicators in terms of geophysics, the potassium radiometrics over there. It's very typical of what you would see in a porphyry system. Some of these numbers here just effectively just highlights that we are definitely in a mineralized system. As you can see, there are 3 dots here in a line. There's 3 holes drilled over an IP that historical guys did. They flew an IP, they did an IP survey and then highlighted some targets. They drilled it and those targets came up with numbers. So that again sort of highlights the fact that this is a system that's sort of feeding much like a porphyry system would. Here's a couple of lines that have flown over the Angus prospect, which we talked about previously, which is to the sort of southwest of MERINO in this plot here. And the profile that they came up with, this down here is an atypical porphyry profile. And that's the profile that came up with their survey. So you can see that there is strong evidence. And that sort of highlights why we're very passionate. I think we're opening up sort of a new province, a new canvas for us to draw. One of the key aspects of this area is that the Mines Department in South Australia is very keen that they've understood that with that age dating that we definitely have a new province. The sort of geological boundaries need to be redrawn. One of the things is the CSIRO did as well is they did a whole heap of geochemical, hydrogeological work, testing bore samples, looking for anomalous metals. As you can see here, this is the report the map that CSIRO developed, and they've highlighted these blue areas as places of interest that people should look at for excessive anomalism. So which will indicate some sort of hydrothermal activity, which again aligns with mineralization. And one of the most highlighted space just so happens to sit over our tenements. And you can see those are the elements that are anomalous against background. And when you look at a closer image to the left here, the blue again highlights where that potential CSIRO data sits. And in this diagram, you can see that the boundary that goes around here, this light pink material, is 0 to 50 meters of potential cover, as opposed to the hundreds of meters as we go towards the east. And this is a plan that's with residual gravity anomalies, which is what people look for in IOCG. And as you can see, that there are a lot of potential here that has gone amiss from historical work. So the steeper, the darker lines that you see there are high gravity contrast, which is typical of an IOCG prospect target slash. So this is lines up with our thinking that all this evidence seems to be pointing to the fact that we may have something that's our canvas to draw. We're not sure what we're going to draw in there, but definitely a dominant position in a place where a lot of people miss. It's very similar to like the concept of how Julimar was discovered recently in an area 80 kilometers, north east of Perth, where people would go there and not think about it. So, and Tropicana, Nova Bollinger in the Fraser Belt, Winu, Havrion, the list goes on in terms of what people used to think, like Gold Road is a classic example, the Yamana Belt. They actually thought that that was not endowed. The rocks are too young. So you're not going to find the kind of stuff that you find in the Kalgoorlie goldfields in the Greenstone Belt. But, 10 million ounces today, lots of different thinking is happening. So one of the potentials that we were looking at and we will develop as we get on, once we're listed, is the potential of rare earths. We don't have any information in terms of the clays, but what we do have historically is that they've drilled right into hard rock, and they've got some rare earth numbers. And these numbers are, they're not highlighted, but they're definitely showing that there is mineralization of this nature in these rocks. So the analogy from that is that, the potential weathering that and that would happen over the years, we should see this floating into the clay areas, the more developed areas there, right? And Petrotherm has come out and announced a whole heap of rare earths in clays, same as Indiana. So we're definitely in the same province. We're definitely in the same residence of potential rare earths in clays. That's not too much in doubt at this point in time. And where do we think the leaching could be? And that's just an interpretation that we have, not set in concrete or anything that's there. Based on the drilling that we have, that's where we think we would be, and that will be sort of one of the key points that we will chase. This interpretation is based on a known paleo channel that goes through there, and that paleo channel definitely will be the carrier for any potential rare earths in clays. The Lake Barlee project that we have is in WA. It's basically between Leonora and Paynes Fine, which sits about here somewhere. And it's a lake, a sort of gold in lake kind of story. We know there's a greenstone belt that goes underneath here, being displaced. Most of the discovery in the goldfields today has been sort of, as I mentioned earlier, covered, undercover. So we're looking for very simple extensional things, extensional targets that are greenstone based. So we had some historical information that came from the mines department. Dave reprocessed that, came up with potential areas that he thought that we should focus on pre-IPO. We then undertook a drone mag server with a closer space, and lo and behold, we got two definitely walk-up drill targets. We can see splays coming off the main structure, and as most people know, that secondary and tertiary targets, structural targets, is where most kind of potential mineralization would pop up. So we are on the last straws of getting our heritage survey completed, and when that's done, we always just getting a couple of air drill rig to go up there. One of the targets sits on the margin of the lake, which is so that access is easy, and another one we have to trek about 150 meters across the Salt Lake onto an island where we will set up, and that's where we will drill from. The third project is the Challenger West story. It's a very simplistic sort of theory concept. We got a large tenement holding just to the west of the Challenger gold mine. As I said, there's hardly anything done. As you can see in this diagram, 100-kilometer radius around Challenger, and you've got some prospects that carry maybe 20 to 30,000 ounces. Whereas in any mining area, I've just used Kalgoorlie as an example, you would be having hundreds of established mines and lots and lots of prospects. So very underexplored. Potential there's to find another Challenger would be high. It's remote, but that's what we're chasing with the Challenger West story. Again, large holding. We've got an interpreted map here from Dave's work. We can see where all this sits on the margin of this anomaly, and that's the place that we're chasing. So there's a clear correlation between sitting on the margin of this anomaly and discovery. So that's the first place we're chasing, and that will be part of that path to go forward. And the news flow basically will be all focus on highway. In the first quarter, we're going to be completing the heritage clearance, looking at our rare earth potential, mapping this area. The IP survey, MERINO and Angus, obviously is going to be the mainstay of all our work. The focus is to discover and to target MERINO and Angus and mapping as well. So, and then follow up with drilling. As soon as that's clear, whether it's the end of the first quarter or the second quarter, we'll be drilling as soon as we can. So really the focus without doubt is on MERINO, Angus and Brahman. That area is definitely the platform where we're going to move all our work. And following, obviously target generation and Angus that follows, and review of those gravity targets that we looked at. We'll be looking at those targets concurrently, and obviously, it's a free flowing news flow, whatever happens first. And there's no doubt that Lake Barlee, it's the walk-up drill target is priority. We will go and drill that, and then we'll follow up as we move. But the focus, as you can see in the news flow here, is absolutely on highway itself. At this point, I'll pass it on to Dave McSkimming to give us a sort of a geological look on the projects itself. So, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Noel. Yeah, you've covered a lot there, so I'll just go back over a bit of it. Feel free to come in and chat over me whenever you want. Yeah, we might as well go back reverse order. So if you just want to just go back to that slide 18 of Challenger there. Okay, so we've picked up this ground west of Challenger, as Noel said, and we're looking for a gold prospect out there. Challenger is a fairly interesting story because a lot of credit in the early days was given to surface geochemistry, in particular calcrete, in the discovery of Challenger. But those ideas are being questioned, and you can see that we've got two gravity highs represented by the white and the pink. And as Noel mentioned, all the known deposits are situated on the edges of those Archean blocks. Our geophysicist, our contract geophysicist, has written a lot of papers on Challenger, and he's got some ideas regarding the structure and targeting strategies there. So we look forward to working with him and getting on the ground, and I think we'll be going straight into a more geophysical approach undercover and investigating the structures to delineate where along those gravity gradients we might find another Challenger. Probably the next thing we're going to look at is Barlee. Noel, if you want to have a look at that. Maybe, yeah, there, if we can have a look at those anomalies. So Nick was the same consultant we used at Barlee, and we flew this mag drone survey, as Noel mentioned, and it was a great success because we're kind of limited in options there, being at the edge of a salt lake. We couldn't use electrical methods. We couldn't use any geochemistry. So drone mag was basically it. And yeah, the results were fantastic. And you can see there we've got a target A and a target B, which are the two priority targets. And in both cases, we've got a flexure in the greenstone belt, which is those north-south highlighted in yellow strips you've got there. Yep. So what's happened there is that the greenstone's being compressed between two granites, which is ideal to move all your fluids through, hopefully containing gold. And it was just a matter of looking where gold might precipitate. Now we know this area is gold bearing. We've got Halley's deposit just along south to the, just along strike to the southwest, and then a neighbouring tenement to the east, also in the lake. There's a privateer in there who dollies up gold from surface outcrops. So I guess what we really needed to find was an indication of somewhere that we could host the gold. Knowing that all the system aspects were there, we just need to see where it could be hosted and preserved. And you can see in both target A and B, there's kinks, which we believe to be antiformal. So we've got a nice structural setting. And then if you look particularly at target A with those striations coming off, we've interpreted that they could well be magnetic pyrrhotite. And with the analogy deposit for this project is Q, Big Bell Gold Mine, that's owned by Westgold, where gold there is associated with magnetic pyrrhotite. So, yeah, we're really lucky to have delineated these targets in that environment. And fortunately for us, they lie close enough to the edges of the salt lakes that we'll be able to put a rig on solid ground rather than actually on the crust of the salt. Yeah, so it's just a matter of tidying up some native title there and getting the clearances, and then we'll be in there. And I guess if we can roll back now to highway, yeah, I just need to talk about a couple of them. Let's go to slide 7 or page 7. Okay, so there was, so Noel touched on the fact that most of our ground at highway is undercover. If you just quickly glance at that surface geological map there, you can see that it's really only the red, the blue, and the pink, I guess, that are basement rocks that we're interested in that are exposed at the surface. So all that green and yellow is showing it's all undercover. So that's been one of the obstacles to previous workers in this area. The other reason why it's been left alone is because it's been age dated wrong. So people have downgraded the prospectivity of it. And lastly, the little bits of historical work that were done, and particularly at the MERINO prospect, none of that data has ever been put into the state databases. So those molybdenum grades that Noel mentioned before, they're the highest in the Gawler Craton outside the known mines, but you won't find them in the South Australian databases. I had to retrieve them out of old imaged reports. And hang on, where have we got here? There. So the old reports also contained a lot of information regarding the porphyry alteration systems that were going on there. If you just want to jump down to maybe slide 9 now. Yeah, so given that there was the areas mostly undercover with very few instances of outcrop, the previous exploration was kind of reconnaissance. You can see in that image there's a lot of tracks, and then the pink and red, the lighter hues there are representative of a granite that's outcropping, a porphyritic granite in this case. And you can see those results there that are indicative of a polymetallic type system, but they never, because they were looking for IOCGs, they never really recognised it as a porphyry system. Now, within these reports, it discusses the alteration assemblages. Like Noel said, there was an IP line which picked up pyrite, which they drilled in one of those holes, but they never commented that the pyrite could be a halo to a porphyry system. Yet all the petrology reports, which were outsourced to third-party consultants, were all saying this is all porphyry. So we have a tiny little bit of outcrop in this area, and we have indicators that we're in a system, but no one's ever vectored to undercover to actually find the core of the system. So we can't be exactly sure what metals we're going to get there, but we do strongly believe that that the system is focused towards the southwest in that image, probably within a range of 2,000 meters, and that's based on the alteration assemblages that are described in those historical reports. We did zircon analysis on Kin 12. Kin 12 was a very shallow hole. It was only drilled to 9 meters, and it was drilled by the South Australian government, also along those tracks. Unfortunately, all the holes that were drilled by the joint venture parties have been lost. So we've only been able to get that one sample out of that Kin 12, and the zircons there are showing an incredible multi-stage, multi-phase hydrothermal alteration of rare earths, uranium, thorium, molybdenum, and a host of elements that will substitute for zircon in the zircon lattice, including copper and gold to a lesser extent. But yeah, it's basically indicating that we're in a hotspot for hydrothermal activity. And we think at this point we're at the upper portions of a cupola that's coming out of an intrusive that just, if you want to scroll down, Noel, to slide 10. Is it up? Yeah, that one. Sorry. No, go to 8. Sorry. Okay, so we've got that. That shadow area is the whole intrusive complex that I interpret to exist at MERINO. And you can see that there's only a small portion of the outcrops that's been tested. So we've got scope for, well, let me see, probably about 150 square kilometres of potential targets within there. A couple of them are highlighted there, one with that scarn to the south, and then further west was the bullseye magnetic low that we think might be a porphyry core that also needs to be tested. There's a couple of other anomalies also along that contact. You can see that north-east striking contact between the shadow, which is intrusive, and the wall rocks. So we've got a few targets to test there. But probably one of the most important aspects of all this is that the whole area was previously considered less prospective because it didn't share the age relationships with the Olympic Dam province. And about 15 kilometres to the southeast of the MERINO prospect, I also retrieved another sample from the Tonsley Core Library in Adelaide, and sampled, that hole was drilled in 1979 and has been stored by the state ever since. And I extracted some zircons from that and had them analysed. And what we found was that there's a volcano sedimentary package out there that is actually the same age as the Olympic Dam complex and all the other mines that are related to it, like Carapatina and Prominent Hill. And the indication is that it's an extensional environment, which is very important in the evolution of these mineral deposits because you want your crust to be thinning to allow these upper crustal intrusions to come along and intrude into that, into the near surface where they're currently preserved. So within the whole of the highway project, we have all sorts of different depths preserved. You're looking at MERINO there, which is a upper level felsic intrusive, so a cupola. But further south, we have volcanics, where we're potentially going to find epithermal type hosts. We've also got wall rocks that you can see there, which will preserve skarn type hosts. And then a lot of the researchers and industry people in South Australia recognise that there is an interrelationship between porphyries and IOCGs. If we go north of MERINO there, we head under what is called Mandara Formation, which has the potential to cap IOCGs under basement. And I think those sorts of things are starting to be recognised broadly in the state. So in summary, we've got a whole host of environments in highway project that could host a deposit. All of it's easily accessible due to the shallow depths of the cover. There has, to the best of my knowledge, been no systematic exploration for porphyry systems in South Australia, mostly because the depth of cover to the east prevents the electrical methods that you need to detect porphyries from being successful. There are other porphyry deposits found in South Australia to the south, and arguably Tunkilia and Tarcoola Gold are also mesothermal porphyry systems, that they weren't recognised as being the same age as Olympic Dam until after they were discovered. So we've got a new area that's been misunderstood. We've correctly placed it tectonically and placed the ages of it, and it's allowed us to come into the area with a new strategy that no one else has tried, which is to go for the porphyries as well as the IOCGs.
Okay. We'll go to question and answer, but before we do that, I think I would just want to emphasize what David said. It's the geophysics that people are using to make discovery or create targets work like everything else. You know, the more shallow your potential target is, the better it's going to work. So instead of having to try and work 500 meters or 800 meters down with cover, we're talking, you know, at some places 10 meters, at some places at 50, some places at 100. So those are optimum depth, and that's very important to take note, because it's your rate of success from that and how you define your targets. So the more effective these things are working, the better chances that you have.
That's absolutely correct. So we're dramatically increasing our chances of success because we open up a whole new mineralising system that's not available to those operators to the east because they're too deep.
Yeah, and that's one. It's a different form of an IPO where we actually now stumbled onto an area where it's literally a blank canvas, and it's up to us to draw the picture that we have, because, and you know, the key here is the shallow cover to depth of basement. That's very important. It's a small minor point that people talk about, but we, you know, it is very important in the scheme of things.
Yeah,
so,
because
yeah, go on. Dave,
yeah, just simply because it opens up a whole new target spectrum. And all those operators to the east, they all recognise that they've probably got porphyries in there, but they can't come detect them in 2D. But we can.
And that's important. So, David, you want to go to questions? Have any questions out there?
Yeah, actually, we have not received any questions and all. I mean, participants can actually click on the Q&A tab to put any question forward to our panelists. But so far, I have not received anything. Give a couple minutes, you know, for anyone who has questions to maybe put forth the questions so that we can get Noel and Dave to answer.
Well, while we're waiting for the questions to come in, I guess, you know, one of the key things is, you know, with the current market, you know, everything's lithium and rare earths. But what I want to sort of highlight for we is that lithium and rare earth story is now 2 years old. Well, only 2 years old. So the discovery that to come for more potential lithium pegmatites is still out there. There's no known, this is only where you're going to find it. But I think that will come and that will develop with market. What we will have now is that we have literally a cooking system that's sitting there, and the potential, as we tried to sort of describe in this webinar, is that it's there to be taken. So we got all sorts of potential systems there, but again, it all comes down to the truth machine and getting out there to drill. So that's probably a good takeaway that we would like people to have, is that, you know, it is a new area, it's a new zone, and you don't sort of stumble onto this kind of, and with a dominant landholding often.
Yeah, and I guess for the Gawler Craton, if you look at a map of South Australian tenements, you might say, oh, there's still some opportunity there. But if you take out all the salt lakes, the Woomera defence area, the conservation areas, the Aboriginal land, actually most of the Craton is occupied. So to have this area that's still available, which was a combination of the bad age dating, or the misunderstanding, I should say, the shallow cover, which is mobile, and also the fact that none of the historical data was digitised and put into the databases. If none of those factors were true, then this ground would not have been available.
No questions coming, David?
I think somebody mentioned that it's disabled, but it should be. It should be available to everybody, unless the attendees want to put it in the chat function and all. Sorry, there'll be some technical problem on the Zoom webinar.
Anyone with questions, and feel free to email that to us, and we'll sort of, those questions. So
Okay, let's see. Can you try the chat? Somebody try the chat.
Yes, can see that.
Yep.
We'll close it up if there's no questions, David.
Okay. Anyway, we have our emails on I think some people might have received our emails and all. So you can email any questions you have, and then we'll attend to it. All right. Thank you very much.
And we'll have this recorded, so anyone who needs to watch it again, I suspect it'll be on the website, David.
Yep, we will. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.